McGrowl, Book 2, Chapter 5. Best in Show. The bell rang for last period, and the students started swarming up and down the staircase like an army of eager ants. Tryouts for the big dog show were about to begin, and no one wanted to miss a single moment. As they rushed and pushed and pulled their way to the field where the exciting event was about to take place, everyone was buzzing about the mysterious incident that had just occurred. Sometime during Mel Muchnick's speech, while the entire population of Stevenson Upper and Lower School was outside watching the festivities, a mysterious stranger had been busy rifling through Mabel Rabkin's office. Miss Rabkin, the beloved school registrar, 80 years old if she were a day, had returned to find hundreds of manila folders spread randomly around her office. Every student who had ever attended Stevenson, even for a semester, had a permanent file in this hallowed room. The files contained records of absolutely everything pertaining to each student. Miss Rabkin was unable to tell immediately if anything had been stolen. She couldn't imagine what use the folders would be to anyone. The purpose of the break-in remained a mystery, all the more unsettling because of it. Officer Nelson was on the scene in a flash and dusting for fingerprints. He had only just completed his mail order course in this tricky field and was having a fair amount of trouble locating a single print. He was highly allergic to the dust with which he had to cover the fingerprints and kept sneezing and obliterating the clues. As Thomas hurried past the little room, he made a mental note to make sure to return after Officer Nelson was finished. He was prepared to do a little sleuthing himself. "Where's McGrowl? Prelims are about to start," said Violet as she caught up with Thomas. "Points off for lateness, you know." The two friends hurried out the door and started for the soccer field. As if on cue, the big yellow dog came bounding over. "Good boy," Thomas said, giving the fur on the top of McGrowl's head an affectionate pat. "Ready for the trials?" The dog wagged his tail eagerly and sent Thomas a telepathic message indicating resounding confidence. At that moment, Louis Musser and Spike attempted to push rudely ahead of Thomas and McGrowl. McGrowl discreetly stuck out a paw in their path, and both dog and boy tumbled instantly to the ground. Louis wasn't the least bit injured, but his feelings were. McGrowl just looked in the other direction and pretended to be interested in a passing butterfly. "I saw that, Wiggins. Apologizer, you're dead meat." Louis was nothing if not direct. "I didn't do anything," Thomas replied hastily. "He didn't. Pink is to the sky." Violet kissed her two little fingers and pointed them straight up. "I swear on the life of my parakeet." "Yeah? Well, just in case, I'm putting both of you on my list, and you know what that means." And then Louis and his equally arrogant dog hurried off to torture someone else. Unfortunately, both Thomas and Violet knew exactly what that meant. Once Louis put you on his list, you had to be especially nice to him, and get off that list quickly, or he would turn your life into a nightmare. McGrowl sent Thomas a short but heartfelt apology. He hadn't meant to get him into trouble. "I accept," Thomas answered gratefully. "It's rude to communicate telepathically when there are others present." Violet tried to sound jealous. Not to sound jealous, but she was. Thomas alone held the thrilling connection to McGrowl's mind. The soccer field was filled with yelling children and barking dogs. Little Esther Mueller, a second grader with high hopes of winning at least a letter of commendation, tried to calm her chihuahua Rumpelstiltskin. A high-strung little pet was refusing to wear the mini matador jacket and sombrero she had made for him from a single piece of blue felt. The dog shook his head violently, dislodging his enormous hat. He jumped up and down, frantically chewing away at the beaded matador jacket that hung in tatters around his quivering torso. Little Esther snapped her fingers loudly and yelled the command that had worked perfectly well the day before. "Cease and obey! Cease and obey!" She was practically in tears, but the dog was beyond reasoning. "Places, please!" Principal Grimble loved the way his voice sounded on the microphone and took great care to enunciate every one of his consonants crisply and clearly. He had no idea how ridiculous it made him sound. "Will the owners and their pets assemble immediately on the far side of the field?" The announcement caused a desperate flurry of activity among children and dogs. For many of the participants, simply getting their animals to cooperate long enough to get into a line was utterly hopeless. McGrowl trotted obediently and quickly to his place on the starting line and carefully eyed the competition. Dogs of all shapes and sizes got into position. Stuart Seltzer's sturdy little beagle, Franklin, looked promising, but held no real threat. Sophie Morris's poodle, Fluffy, simply looked foolish. McGrowl was not about to lose any sleep over a dog that allowed her fur to be cut so that her legs looked like lollipops. Principal Grimble blew his whistle and called for silence. And he got it. "Let the games begin," McGrowl thought to himself. Thomas had to admit, too, that he was raring to go.